so funny, officer," the boy's voice cracked, echoing in the silent courtroom. The police officers had been laughing under their breath, their smirks sharp enough to cut. A teenage kid standing alone before the judge, treated like he was nothing, like his very presence was a joke. The laughter wasn't just cruel, it was humiliating. But what the officers didn't know, what no one in that room could have guessed, was that this boy wasn't as powerless as they thought, because his father was someone they should never have mocked. And when the truth came out, everything changed. Before that humiliating day in court, Marcus was just a teenager trying to live a normal life. 16 years old, tall for his age but quiet, the kind of kid who would rather sketch in his notebook than argue back when someone teased him. He lived in a modest neighborhood, went to public school, and stayed out of trouble as much as possible. But being a young black kid in his city meant he couldn't escape the constant watchful eyes of police officers. He noticed how their patrol cars slowed down when he and his friends walked home, how store clerks followed him with their eyes a little too long. It wasn't new. It was just the air he breathed, unfair, heavy, and always there. What most people didn't know, though, was that Marcus came from a family with influence. His father wasn't just another working man, he was someone whose job demanded secrecy, discipline, and authority, but Marcus never bragged about that. To him, his father was just Dad. The man who made pancakes on Saturdays, the one who gave long talks about integrity and resilience. So when the officers laughed at him that day, Marcus stood silently, fists clenched, cheeks burning. He knew they didn't see him for who he was, a teenager with dreams, a son with a strong father, a kid who mattered. They saw only what they wanted, someone small, someone easy to dismiss. And in that moment, Marcus realized something he had been taught his whole life. Sometimes, people will only respect you once they're forced to see the truth. But they had no idea just how shocking that truth would be. The courtroom should have been a place of fairness, of truth. But for Marcus, it felt like a stage where everyone had already decided the ending. He had been accused of something small, almost laughable, loitering outside a convenience store with two friends. Nothing was stolen, nothing was broken, no one had been harmed. Yet here he was, dragged into court as though he were a hardened criminal. His friends weren't even charged. But Marcus, he was the one singled out, the one the officers decided to make an example of. As he stood there, the officers who had brought him in sat along the back wall, whispering and chuckling. Every smirk felt like a slap in the face. He could hear one of them mutter, "Just another one of them, wasting our time." Marcus tried to focus on the judge's words, but the laughter echoed louder than anything else. He clenched his fists, remembering what his father had always told him, never let them see you break. But holding it in was harder than ever. His heart pounded, his cheeks burned. He wasn't just fighting the charges, he was fighting humiliation, fighting invisibility. Because in that moment, he was Marcus, the kid with a father who tucked him in at night. He was Marcus, the artist who loved sketching city skylines. To them, he was just a stereotype in a hoodie. The prosecutor, flipping through papers, treated the case like it was already decided. "This young man," she said, "needs to understand consequences." Her words dripped with condescension. No one mentioned that Marcus had no record, that he was an honor student, that he dreamed of studying architecture. None of that mattered in a system where skin color spoke louder than facts. And then came the moment that made the air in the courtroom shift. One of the officers laughed openly, loud enough that everyone turned. The judge banged his gavel, demanding order, but the damage was done. Marcus's humiliation was complete. His voice trembled as he whispered, barely audible, "Why are they laughing at me?" The silence that followed was deafening. For a second, the entire courtroom seemed to freeze. The judge narrowed his eyes, looking toward the officers. And that's when the door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped inside, walking with the kind of quiet authority that silenced whispers instantly. Marcus's chest tightened. He knew that walk anywhere, his father. But to the officers, he was just another spectator at first, until the bailiff straightened, whispering something quickly into the judge's ear, until people began to notice the shift, the respect in the judge's tone, the way the courtroom suddenly seemed to sit a little straighter. Marcus locked eyes with his father, and though his father gave only the slightest nod, Marcus knew. The officers were about to learn a truth that would wipe those smirks from their faces forever. And when that truth came out, the laughter would stop. The judge leaned forward, his tone sharp now. "Officers, this is a courtroom, not a comedy show. Do you find this young man's situation amusing?" For the first time all morning, the laughter stopped. The smirks faded, but not out of remorse. The officers shifted uncomfortably, like kids caught misbehaving, but Marcus could see it in their eyes. They still thought he was beneath them, just another boy who should be put in his place. And then his father stood. The room seemed to shrink as he walked toward the front, his voice calm but commanding. "Your Honor, I think the court deserves to know why my son is here today, and why these officers find his life so entertaining." A hush fell over the courtroom. The officers froze. Marcus's heart hammered in his chest. The judge gestured for him to continue. His father reached into his jacket, pulling out a badge, one that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Not a police badge, not a local authority, but the unmistakable emblem of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The room gasped, murmurs rippled across the benches, the officers' faces drained of color. "I am the director of the FBI," his father said, his voice steady as steel. "And those men," he pointed directly at the officers in the back, "thought it was acceptable to humiliate my son, to turn a courtroom into a circus while ignoring his innocence." Marcus had never seen grown men crumble so quickly. The officers' arrogance evaporated. They lowered their eyes, their confidence stripped bare. But Marcus wasn't looking at them anymore. He was looking at his father, who placed a firm hand on his shoulder. And for the first time that day, Marcus felt the weight lift, the suffocating sense of being small, powerless, unseen. The judge cleared his throat, voice shaking slightly. "This case is dismissed." But the damage had already been done. The world had just seen who held the real power. And for Marcus, that moment would change everything. When the gavel struck and the judge dismissed the case, Marcus should have felt relief. And in some ways he did. The officers' smirks were gone, replaced with shame and fear. The courtroom that once mocked him now stared in stunned silence. For the first time that day, he wasn't invisible. But deep down, Marcus knew the truth. It shouldn't have taken his father's badge to prove his worth. It shouldn't have taken power, status, or a name to silence their laughter. What about the kids whose parents don't carry that kind of authority? What about the countless voices dismissed, mocked, and silenced every single day? Walking out of the courthouse, Marcus felt his father's hand on his shoulder. It was steady, reassuring, but also heavy with unspoken lessons. His father didn't need to say it out loud. "This is bigger than you. This is the world you're growing up in." And Marcus realized something that would stay with him forever. Racism doesn't always scream in your face. Sometimes it laughs quietly in the back of the room, confident that no one will ever call it out. The officer's punishment, the headlines, the whispers in the city, that was one outcome. But the true impact was deeper. Marcus had seen with his own eyes how fragile respect could be, how quickly dignity could be stripped away, and how hard it was to reclaim. So I'll leave you with this question: why should it take power to earn basic respect? Because until we answer that, stories like Marcus's aren't just stories, they're warnings.